Jaguar meant everything. Like, genuinely, to me and to loads of you guys, they were one of the top car brands on earth. They built cars that looked insane, sounded insane. They made you hard. Jaguar had the heritage, the looks, the racing stories. They had the keys to the kingdom. And then they decided, nah, let's do this instead. We could not believe it. A move that was meant to rebrand Jaguar for the future instead became one of the fastest and most confusing PR disasters the car world has ever seen. A company worth $29 billion somehow managed to nuke 97% of its revenue in 3 months. What were they thinking? Or was there a more sinister entity behind this insane move? This is the story of how this car became a $29 billion failure. To understand how they fucked it, we need to go back in time. It's 1922. A young adult named William Lyons works for a small garage building sidecars. The money is shit, but one day he has a genius idea. Why don't I build sexy looking cars using the spare parts I have and bump up the price? On paper, it sounds stupid, but he started popping off. It was genius. Jaguar wasn't about being the fastest or the most reliable. Customers loved the brand as they could look rich without actually being rich. No one suspected a thing. William rinsed and repeated the format and became known as the Brilliant Forger. But as the brand grew, so did William's greed. He kept rebranding, chasing the next big thing. The name changed a few times. Swallow Sidecar, SS Car Ltd, and then he settled with Jaguar Cars Limited. But the core idea stuck. Stunning looks, just good enough performance at a price that felt like a steal. Fast forward a few years, Jaguar gave birth to their first baby, the XK120. Shortly after the C-Type and D-Type went to Le Mans, not just to compete, but to humiliate Aston Martin and Porsche. For a glorious second, Jaguar had it all. Racing dominance, breathtaking beauty, and that TK Maxx price tag. They were the underdog that just became the king. And in 1961, the E-Type was announced. Half the price of an Aston Martin, more beautiful than anything from Italy. This was peak Jaguar. It was so perfect. They displayed it in the MOMA as art. Little did they know, that was also the moment the cracks would start forming. So here's where things get messy. Because Jaguar was nationalized under British Leyland, Jaguar's soul was crushed by the government. The attainable luxury became expensive sports cars. Think of British Leyland as the UK government's attempt to mash every struggling British car company into one big family group and hope it magically worked. They merged Jaguar, Rover, MG, Austin, Morris, Triumph, Land Rover into one organization. On paper, it looked smart. In reality, it was chaos. The game was gone. Jaguar's cars still looked expensive, but under the bonnet, they were questionable. In the 80s, they were so fucked they had to fire bare people to keep afloat. Their stock price flew, but it was a mirage. They weren't building a new identity, they were just painting over the rust. A few years later, Ford bought them for $2.5 billion. They had the money to find themselves. Instead, they built the XJ220, a hollow supercar that was exposed and mocked for lacking the V12 it promised. When you thought it couldn't get any worse, under Ford's ownership, shit hit the fan. The 90s were the era of grandpa. The 2000s were a desperate, failed lunge at catching the teenagers' attention with the Ford Mondeo-based X-Type. Even the glorious F-Type, which I still see as their last true sports car, couldn't save them. They were an old person's brand, lost in a modern world, selling fewer and fewer cars every year. By 2021, even the CEO admitted it. None of our cars make profit. That's when you know you're cooked. So Jaguar came up with a genius solution. If a century of history brought you here, delete the history and start again. Everyone was shocked. This was the cover story for an insane financial pivot. Stop making cars for the middle class who wanted them and return to William Lyons' first idea. Coach building for the elite, Jaguar wanted to become an ultra luxury brand, so they announced the Type 00 and charged $200,000 plus for electric cars for a client that had never thought about them. They weren't betraying their roots, they were returning to it, selling a fantasy to the wealthy. But this time, the fantasy fucked them over. The payoff was instant and brutal. Dealerships worldwide were empty, orders were canceled, brand value fell by 97%, and in a few months, $29.3 billion was gone. Not because electric failed or the car looked too futuristic, but because Jaguar forgot to build the car before it built the commercial. They deleted the V8, they deleted the XJ, they deleted the cars that made them desirable. But worst of all, they deleted the customer. How can you sell a car to a customer who doesn't exist? The CEO retired, the ad agency was fired, but in a boardroom somewhere, this was all part of the plan. Since they had deleted their customer base, now they just had to find a new one. Jaguar didn't fail because they went electric. Jaguar failed because they forgot why people fell in love with them in the first place. They thought the engine was the soul, but the soul was always the identity. And here's the part that actually pisses me off. Jaguar said they had no choice. EVs are the future. Regulation forced our hand. They acted like the world backed them into a corner. But look at Toyota, the most sensible, boring, careful company on the planet, the company that literally invented the eco-friendly image, looked at the same world, the same rules, the same pressure, and decided to build a V8. Toyota said, yeah, we'll electrify, but we're keeping engines people actually get excited about. They hybridized them, they made them cleaner, they evolved them. And it makes you ask, if Toyota can pull this off, why couldn't Jaguar? They had everything. Back in 1922, Jaguar was born selling a fantasy, and in present day, they sold a different fantasy to people who never asked for it. And that's what cost them $29 billion. Who knows what will happen to Jaguar now, but the lesson is simple. Don't bite the hand that feeds you. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and check out the other stories I've previously done.